Okay, so we have close to 50 minutes, I think, for Q&A. And before that, I would like to say that the Lev Tahor community have sent us a reply to Dr. Cavallion's lecture. It is sadly too long for us to actually read out, but I have the handouts, which I will now distribute to all of you here, whomever wants to read it. Now we will open the floor for questions. Yes, please.
You use the term rape, but I didn't see the evidence of rape as it's normally used in the legal literature. So could you clarify this?
It's working, this mic. You're quite right, because we need to open your question to a wide range. What is rape? Is it exploited? Is it raped? Is raped? Is exploit authority himself of women? What is raped? It's not just people who catch me in the dark street and raped me. It's not. It's usually people who close to me, in my house, in my workplace. You see, you quite right. But what is actually raped? I think it's raped. Those women were exploited by him, by Eliezer Berland, and of our law in Israel think it is raped. That's why he don't want to talk with the police. They just in the finally they treat him very perspective, very honor. They just want to chat with him, to talk with him, okay, and not blame him. But he escaped. That's we said that you know why you are escaped. It's you have a burning heart on your head, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few comments for the three lectures. I will start maybe with the lectures of Anat and Gabi. I think you were speaking about fascinating phenomena of new Jewish religious movements. I'm a bit sorry that I think that the cases here are clear cut. Of course, you are wrong, Anat, because he wasn't rape. There is a legal definition. He wasn't. You are right. He wasn't accused of that. He was accused of terrible things, but not of rape. And I don't think that we as scholars should get into those matters and decide in those cases instead of the law courts. So I think in those cases the legal matters are quite clear cut. The leaders of both of those movements are in prison. I hoped to hear much more of an academic analysis, because I think those cases, both those cases are very, very interesting, and there's a lot of things that we can contribute to the discussion apart from the value judgment that might be quite clear cut. In those cases, I found it, for instance, fascinating the case, first of all, the choice of the Ashkenazi name and habitus of the Lev Tahor movement, although many of its leaders are, the leader is a Sephardi and many of the participants. So I think here we have a very interesting case that we can learn from this very radical case. We can learn not just about Jewish new religious movements, but about Jewish modern Judaism and modern Israel at large. I thought it was fascinating the use of the Holocaust here, both by the anti-Lev Tahor group, comparing it, and I regret that you went a little bit with it, because I don't think that the case of the Boko Haram is similar here, but calling Lev Tahor, as much as we may not be pleased with what's worried about what's happening there, but using the term concentration camp, of course. It's very radical, and I think it teaches something about the Israeli scene. And again, of course, they left the whole as a reaction, and not as a reaction using the yellow star, the yellow Magen David. Finally, a few words about your lecture, Nicole, which was fascinating, and I'm grateful that you did offer an academic critical analysis and not just showed us the case study. I think this fascinating, you spoke about this, the grave as a new, a construction of a new sacred place by the Kabbalah Center, which is very interesting. It is interesting to note, and I think it reflects the place of Kabbalah Center, that the grave of Berg is in the ancient Jewish cemetery, but actually separated from it. Yes. It's below in a separator. So in a way, I think it reflects the place of Kabbalah Center on the verge of contemporary or ancient Judaism. Of course, that's partly because of political reasons. Yes. I assume they wouldn't have been allowed to build the grave, which we will visit in our post-conference field trip, inside the place, the graves. The ancient cemetery itself. There's another interesting case, and that is the pilgrimage to Meron, which is very central in the Kabbalah Center. It's actually the most important Kabbalistic pilgrimage. Again, Kabbalah Center celebrate on the same date of the pilgrimage, which is the largest in the Middle East, the largest pilgrimage. There are hundreds of thousands of people going there. So they actually have a special place which is near Meron, near the central place, in another cave. Again, partly I think because of political reasons, because there's a very interesting description, article by Edith Turner, the wife of Turner. Turner visited Meron the year before he died, I believe, with Yoram Bilo there. And she describes, in the article, describes the very young Kabbalah Center. It was the early years, and they're being attacked by the other pilgrimage because of reading the Zohar on the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So because of that, they separated, but actually they have their own sacred place near, but not at exactly the same place. One final comment, sorry for taking the time, but I thought your lecture was really raised many interesting questions, is the comparison between, you made the comparison between the Lubavitchers and the Kabbalah Center. Now, that's very interesting. Actually, they're very hostile to one another, especially Chabad to Kabbalah Center. But there is a similarity. And one of the similarities that while going to the grave of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, actually, many of the Chabadim, if not most of them, don't believe that he's there because he didn't die. We'll hear about it later in Yoram Bilu's lecture. On the grave of Berg in Safed, also, there is, it is written on the grave, here, it's written on the grave, Philip Berg, he did not die.
Really?
Yeah, so that's exactly, that's again, I think, this the interesting connection between the Lubavitchers. I'm not sure. When we'll visit there, we'll ask them. I hope there will be a representative. When I visited, I was really amazed when I saw it, but I didn't speak with anyone.
In the case of Rabbi Schneerson, did he physically die? He didn't physically die. He is physically in this world, but still many people go to his grave.
Boaz.
Yeah, we'll hear about at the lecture with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Boaz. No? I just thank Boaz.
Comment over there?
Can I comment?
Oh, yeah, of course, Nicole, yes.
Because it's very interesting, because I was looking for some pictures of the grave of Philip Berg, and I didn't found lots of pictures, and I have also the impression, so the Kabbalah Center offers also the pilgrimage to the grave of Berg, but not in that way like they offers other things. So they are very careful to offer it. So that was my impression. and I have no ideas. So one idea is it's not a long time between his death and now, but yeah, I recognized it. Yes. Okay.
I have a question for all three panelists. I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit more about method. Is this on?
More about
About
what?
what?
More about method. So can you tell us about your contact with these groups, how open they are to being studied? Have you done interviews? What are their responses to these kinds of inquiry? I find this response from Lev Tahor very interesting. And if you've done any sort of ethnographic work as well.
You ask all of us?
All of you.
Okay. So if you want, I can start. I did many. I did transdisciplinary work and I work with a multi-methodological approach. So first of all, I did field studies in the Kabbalah Center, and I try to get an impression of the structure of the Kabbalah Center. And while my field studies, I also get in contact with people which I ask for interviews. And then I did many interviews. I did 20 interviews for my analyzation. And the other thing is I analyzed. So I have two focuses of my studies. The first focus was to analyze the construction of personal identity. The other focus was the analysis of the construction of the collective identity. And for the second step of my studies, I analyzed the web pages of the Kabbalah Center, the publications with a narrative approach. So I try to understand what's the dominant reception lines are, and how it has been transformed in the Kabbalah Center. So I hope my English was good to understand.
Okay, in my case, I focus mostly on the social reaction to the group. So my issues and my research based mostly on the media, the judiciary rules in Canada, social workers in Montreal, Jewish activists in Montreal, a politician in Israel, and some confidential material from the Authority for the Child Protection in Quebec, and from Ontario ruling, again, confidential material. I have to confess, I have never met any active member of the group. I've seen many interviews. You can see them on the media, and also some cameras, candid cameras, not so candid, but some information got by some journalist and ex-member who went inside the group and took photographs. So far now, the group is very, very suspicious, so it's very difficult to go into it, with the exception of a few families that are permitted to visit their children, and I also got this information from them.
I want to answer you, both you and Boaz together. My interest is what's happened to our society here in Israel. I'm from Israel. I deal with my interest is we have a lot of people, thousands of people in Israel that goes to or following after those kind of persons like Eliezer Berland and others that I research and visit and talk with their adherents. And unfortunately, I must admit that I don't like what's happened in Israel in these issues because I think those people are exploited, people are misused, religion, Torah, Kabbalah, and other streams in Judaism, two very good streams in Judaism. They misused them, they exploit people to get their money, their health, a lot of their time, a lot of people works for those people, those leaders, and it's not Judaism. And I think what's happened nowadays is because we are a society of too much computers and less than feeling, loves each other, etc., etc. So it's a lot of people don't connect with those computers and the modern society, and that's why they go after and following those people who don't, as I see them, don't really use Judaism, but really used something else, not good, for my opinion.
Yes, any other, I think Eileen and maybe Adam afterwards. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all three papers. I enjoyed them and learnt a lot. I want to ask Professor Cavallon something that probably isn't quite fair, but it's why did you ask the question? I mean, I agree, if you define a sect that way, it is a sect, and if you define a cult in the cultivating way, but nobody really thinks of a cult that way. The four people that you mentioned, Langoni doesn't actually like using the word cult now. He prefers cultic in certain situations. Hassan, Ross and Singer certainly do use, or Singer's dead, but the other two, and she did use destructive cult. But why did you say that? You don't say what they say in your paper. The only clue that you give us is that it gave permission to the worried parents. Now, don't get me wrong, it sounds a very unpleasant cult movement. You know, obviously one doesn't approve of all this stuff they're doing with children, etc. But what do you think you actually added by asking this question and saying, if we accept their definition, then it is a destructive cult? Why did you want to say that?
It's a good question and it's very personal, because my point of view...
Well, you don't have to answer, sorry.
My point of view in other researchers, even on the law proposal of the parliamentary committee in 2013, which was proposed as a law against cults in Israel, according to the material they received from the concerned parents and so on. I personally was against this because I believed that is unproductive and counterproductive and very, very bad law, because cult is very hard to define and it can become a catch-all category of criminalizing any kind of group, from educational, health, or whatever. It's personal because in all my papers, I took an attitude of sympathy to forms of belief and health or alternative way of being in Israel and elsewhere, as just yes, deviant, but not criminal. And in this case, I had a very particular process when I started from a position of criticism, from a position of sympathizing Lev Tahor, and the more I received material, the material was appealing. So let's say that this conclusion is something very personal, because for the first time, and I have to be an honest scholar, for the first time I have to confess that, name it as we like. You can name it a total institution or a criminal organization, or it has some similarities with Ross or Langon or Hassan or the old generation of anti-cult movements. In this case, I can say that there is something in there. I am not talking about brainwashing, but I'm talking about lack of minimal stimulation of children and imprisonment. Because even if you don't use lockers or keys or barbed wires, when you take a child and give him poor tools to deal with the outstanding words. If you see the movie of the children in Spanish, the small girls, they were afraid to see a camera because they never see it. So I think that in modern time, even in Berland case, there is some movement with the outstanding word. In the case of Lev Tahor, they are completely secluded, and there is no way to escape from there because you don't have any resources to survive outside of this group. So let's say, using the term of cult, I can change it with total institution. For me, it's the same. I'm worried about the group. I'm worried about what is going to become next. Now they move again. In 2 years, they move from place to place. And just try to imagine what it means for a child to move from place to place, but not only, to move from family to family because they don't have any emotional attachment to their family when they are taken away as a punishment. If we talk about psychological categories, I think that most of this group is post-traumatic stress disorder impaired.
Adam?
Thank you to all three speakers. It says hello. So. Okay, thank you to all three speakers. I would like to make 3 brief comments. One is to the last 2 speakers. I think you kind of received the atmosphere of the room that this may be a problematic. I just want to emphasize, I think, why you were asked about method. Because as sociologists, criminologists, anthropologists, not speaking with your subjects is a major, major problem. I think it should be out there. Diagnosing someone as suffering from PTSD without speaking with them, as I know you were exposed to materials that I wasn't exposed to, but I think in other cases it's a problem. On the other hand, I don't think we should not make a stand. And you are making a brave move, and I respect that. But should be very careful with, I won't say accusations, because I think you were careful with those, but with talking about someone who's in absentia, he's not here. And I don't mean it's not fair, I mean that's also the case, but it's a problem to talk about someone. And Lev Tahor is an interesting case because it really takes it to the extreme, Because for other groups, we can say this is just social persecution, but here I agree it's more complicated, but still. The second comment is about the use of destructive cult. I just want to say that as in many cases, this term was brought into use by very clearly anti-cultic activists, and it was brought into use when other terms were denied by courts and by academics. And this was done very rapidly. In 2011, they didn't speak about destructive cults. They spoke about cults in the report of the welfare ministry in Israel. But then several courts in Israel said cults is a catch-all phrase. Academics riled against it, said this is going back to terminology that was denied in the 80s. So they said, we're not against cults, we're against destructive cults. Now, the term is not clearer than cults, it's just newer. And because it's newer, there is less opposition to it. And as you said, this was the first ruling of an Israeli court utilizing the case. It's a major victory for the anti-cultists, but this is because it's a new term, because it doesn't have so much attached history to it that we can say, look at all of these case rulings from the United States, Europe, that says that cult is not a term, but destructive cult is a new term, so it can be used by the court and by the anti-cult. So we just need to be aware that the switching of the term doesn't make it clearer necessarily. Doesn't make it invalid, but it doesn't make it clearer. And finally, to Nicole, I actually have a question and not a comment. And that's, sorry about this. And that's, you spoke about a lot of things in the Kabbalah Center. What you didn't speak about is God at all. He was God,
Yeah.
God, or the Sefirot.
Yeah.
They weren't there. When they say we can fix the world, they say it's like a flat world. We fix Israel, the whole world gets fixed. Doesn't it ever go up to God and then back down? Just looking at the history of Kabbalah, there was a lot of attempt to work about divinity, and then divinity will influence the world. With the Kabbalah Center, is there any access to divinity? Is the Sefirot, are the
Yes.
Sefirot there?
Yes.
And specifically in pilgrimage, I mean. Thank you.
So that's a very important question, I think. So the one point is, yes, the Kabbalah Center deal with a concept of God or the divine, but they transform it. They don't speak about God, they speak about the energy. That when I speak about the energy, I mean I mean that what you mean when you say the divine. So what's important also in that case is in the Kabbalah Center is that there is a transformation in the context of the attribution to something. So, and I think that's the answer of your question. So also they also deal with they also integrate the Tree of Life, the Sefirot system, but they change the attribution to it. In most of the cases is the transformation in that sense that they offer. I don't know how can I say it, a kind of healing system. So every Sefirot has a connection to something which heals a human soul or a human person. So I think that's the main point in the Kabbalah Center.
And does this have a connection to specific places? So you want to connect to a certain Sephirah, you'll go to a certain place or not?
No, the connection to the places in the context of the pilgrimages is the Kabbalah Center adopt the Kabbalistic adopt the idea that what I present at the beginning, that sorry, I forgot the word. The nefesh, the part of the soul, leads to the stay at the graveside. Yes, but they don't speak about the nefesh of the tzaddikim or the holy persons are there. They speak about there is a kind of energy, but they don't specify it. I don't find anything. I also, while my field studies is very interesting, I did my field studies also here in the community in Tel Aviv, and while my field studies, the Kabbalah Center, and they was really, and it's important to say, open-minded. To me as a researcher, they answered my question and they showed me anything I want to see, and they invited me to come to do a energy tour to the grave of Yehuda Ashlag in Jerusalem, and I met the Kabbalah Center teacher there at midnight at the cemetery, and we was there, and I was there with 2 other people from the Kabbalah Center, and I did what they asked me to do, and I had to turn through the grave. I have to cross the grave of Yehuda Ashlag, and they told me I have to breathe because I can breathe the energy of the tzaddik. And then we also we pray together, Baruch Atah, and then we eat something and drink something for the manifestation of the energy, and that was it. So that's what example of my field studies. So I think what's important, they adopt Jewish traditions, also the Jewish idea of, or the Kabbalistic idea of there is a kind of tzaddik nefesh at the graveside, but they transform it. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for one last comment. You wanted? No, you. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
But maybe they want to react to my comments.
Yes, I would like.
Thank you for your comments. It's right. As scholars, we have to be very careful to judge groups in absentia, as you say. But let's use our common sense. What does it mean to be a child being beaten at the age of 6 months, being taken from family to family without any attachment to any emotional figure? As a psychotherapist, this is my conclusion. Of course, you're right. We have to check it with the people. I did check. I did check with people who were hospitalized after they left the place, and the symptoms were typical to CPTSD, the complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It means trauma after trauma for years and years. And if we don't speak about violence, we can speak about neglect, and many allegations of the court in Canada were of absolute neglect of parents, food, and all the rest. So that's right. I had to make an epidemiological research inside the group, and this, of course, is impossible. So in my paper, which hopefully is going to be published, I am very careful about this issue. I didn't write it on, and it's only my supposition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your presentations. I was also interested in this Lev Tahor organization, and I do sympathize very much with what you're saying and your concern. I just think that maybe, as somebody said, using these terms, I would say that yes, from what you say, it's a sect, but using the term cult or destructive cults, you're kind of, this is my view, you're kind of blocking your own way. So I would suggest that these things that you are talking about, the material that you have, clearly it has some criminal components. Wouldn't it be interesting to look at these components from different legal perspectives? Because I'm thinking what you're saying, spanking a child of 6 months is probably not legal maybe in every country. And they are moving from country to country, and that way they can evade maybe some laws. So maybe if you want to do something about this, try to approach it from a legal perspective more than from an emotional perspective. Am I making sense? Do you understand?
Yes, first time I'm not a lawyer.
No, I know, but
and Rivka Makayas did a 50-page work of 5 years of collecting allegation, and her work was outstanding. I never saw a judge who paid so much time to
present and disseminate a report like this. Again, she's not a scholar. She works only on allegation and on due process and testimonials and deposition and whatever. What I can tell you, I am off of this issue. I published my work. I feel so overwhelmed by the testimonials that I feel that also scholars have the duty to change the issue of their research the moment they get too much involved.
I agree with that, but I hope that somebody picks up the thread where you leave it out. Oh.
I invite you.
Yeah, okay. But thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay, so thank you very much again for all our free speakers and for you, the audience. I think that now we shall retire for lunch one level above, right? Yes.
Above, have your bag.
Okay, thank you very much.